that are on my mind tonight. If I were to provide a title for this first half of what we're going to talk about tonight, for at least tonight, I would title it "The Extent of the Problem." In other words, one of the points tonight will be to show you that what we're dealing with here is very pervasive and wide scale and widespread. And that's one of the main points that I'd like to impress upon everyone tonight. All right, so here's the situation. The topic tonight is the biological research related to the Morgellons issue that's been going on. Now, many of you may be aware of certain papers that I've written that have put forth the proposition that what we're talking about is not something that it looks like it's affecting a very small segment of the population. Many of you are familiar. I put forth the proposition from what I see that the so-called Morgellons condition is not an isolated thing that can be restricted to a few people that manifest things on their skin, just symptoms on their skin, but based upon the work I'm doing, the underlying criteria and symptoms and manifestations, from what I see, are occurring within the body. It's internal to the body. And that's a critical distinction, because if that's the case, one of the things that you would want to know is what segment of the population is manifesting those symptoms internal to the body. And then what are those symptoms, or what are those physical manifestations? Now, there's a certain level of acceptance of the presence of filaments on the skin, unusual filaments on the skin, as being indicative of the condition. Well, my position is that these filaments are not just to be found on the skin, they're to be found in the body also. And the problem here is to what extent. How many people are showing these filaments internal to the body? And that's what we're talking about tonight. Now, I have made the point that at this time, the general population appears to be demonstrating this, not just a segment. And that's a difficult thing for many of us to want to accept, and I think many of us would rather ignore that type of claim that I'm making. But I'm faced with it whether I like it or not. From a statistical sense, it's way out there in terms of what I'm seeing. Sure, my access to sampling is limited, but if you start taking, 2 to 3 dozen people across the country, as a matter of fact, one of them comes from China, but basically across the country and or the world, and essentially selected at random, and you see the same thing occurring within all of them, the same thing being, one, the presence of these filaments. There's 3 things that I would use as being criteria. If you're getting those kinds of numbers in returns, statistically you're just way out there, and you're not dealing with just a small minority of the population. Well, tonight, what I wanted to do was talk about a specific case that has come up, 2 specific cases that have come up after a lapse of about probably 2 to 3 months since I've been doing this work. Commonly, I'll do my work and repeat it to a certain level, and then I will take a break for a while. Sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's months, and sometimes it's years, and then I will often revisit that subject and see if anything has changed. Well, that's the case here. I haven't done any type of observation of internal samples for probably several months now. But I had an opportunity recently where 2 individuals of interest were available to me and indicated a willingness to participate in this study. And the reasons that these particular individuals were of interest to me was because one of them is a vegetarian. And so the first individual here is a 37-year-old male. And by the way, I say it every paper I have, I'll say it here. I'm not a doctor. I'm not claiming any type of medical expertise or diagnosis. That's not my purpose here. It is to provide information from a research standpoint, and that is solely my purpose. Medical interpretations and such, each of you will have to, and I encourage you actually to seek out your own professionals that you have confidence in. So there's no medical opinions or guidance being provided here in any way. But this individual is a 37-year-old male who's a vegetarian. And it's also an interesting case because this individual was not a vegetarian just for, say, his adult life. He's actually been a vegetarian for essentially his whole life. It's an unusual situation, I guess, but when I think from the time he's at least 4 years old or something like that, his household and his situation was such that his mother raised him as a vegetarian. So that's a little bit of an unusual case, and that's why it interested me, because there's one case that I have studied that, in fact, a study came to being because of a person that I know that's involved in macrobiotic diet, and I was interested whether or not there might be any change from somebody in a macrobiotic diet. And there is change. You'll see in my papers that I indicate, even though it appears the general population is subject to this, it is to varying degree. That seems to be what does vary. But I haven't found anyone who has been excluded from it yet. So here was a case that I was interested in, and I was curious whether or not this individual with this rather unique diet would show any difference or had any bearing on the presence of these filaments internal to the body. And so this individual participated in the study. The particular method being used here is that the individual will take a swallow, not a swallow, but a swig of red wine, and they will clean out their mouth as best as they possibly can. To their satisfaction, there's absolutely nothing in their mouth. And then they'll take a swig of red wine and they'll swish it around amongst their gums and their teeth. And I do it for 3 minutes at a time and three sessions. So this photograph you're looking at is a result of 3 sessions of 3 minutes apiece, expelled red wine and the subsequent contents that exude from the gums of the mouth in this case, into a petri dish. This is what you're looking at, the results of that time period exposed to that. Now, while we're here at this point, let's go ahead and present any counter arguments that I'm aware of, and you will be in a position to evaluate for yourself whether they have any merit or not. But when these samples are produced, there are certain individuals that will claim and state to you that everything is absolutely fine and everything is perfectly normal. There is nothing to be concerned about. Actually, a similar refrain to certain claims I've made in the past. I did catch that. I normally can't catch questions there while I'm talking now, but I hope to later. But this is straight red wine. There's no peroxide involved here at all. This is just straight red wine. So there is a claim put forth that, this is just normal as could be, and if you mix red wine and saliva, it will produce a precipitate, and that's all you're seeing, and that's fine. I will give you my response to that claim, and then you can research for yourself what you find to be the truth. Red wine and saliva does indeed produce a precipitate. Precipitate is solid material. One extremely important distinction between what we're talking about here and the result of that particular reaction is that what I'm speaking of here is a filament. This is not a precipitate that I'm demonstrating to you here. You will know that when you look at this under the microscope. But it is true that red wine and saliva does produce a precipitate. I have done that test. I have subjected that result under the microscope, and we're not talking about the same thing at all, or not even close. Again, you can follow that lead out to your own satisfaction. There's absolutely no relationship to what I'm talking about here. So, I guess each of you can have your own reaction to this photograph, but we're talking about a rather significant mass of material that emerged from this individual from their gums with this exposure to the red wine. The red wine method, we can say, is a result of